Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you're new. Thank you for taking time out of your day to check the video out. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and cover today. And we're starting with something that I don't think is like major, but still pretty significant overall. It actually comes from Genki Japan over on Twitter. And he says Death Stranding 2 has a 4.93 user rating with over 11,000 ratings on the PlayStation Store. It is the highest rated game on the PlayStation Network so far, and 97% of the ratings are 5 stars. So again, nothing major, but still significant to see so many people giving Death Stranding 2, just an overwhelmingly positive rating. The fact that it's the highest rated game on the PlayStation Store and across the PlayStation Network, I would say is honestly it is quite the achievement, right? I don't know that I necessarily expected that, but at the same time, when I think about the quality level of this game and everything it's doing and, it's all just coming together, I guess I'm not that surprised, right? But there you go. I just wanted to inform you that Death Stranding 2 on the beach is the #1 game in terms of rating across the entire PlayStation Network. Moving on from that, we're talking about Firesprite games. I came across this on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit, and it says Firesprite Games, the British PlayStation studio responsible for games such as Horizon Call of the Mountain, The Persistence, and The Playroom, is recruiting for a AAA project with a, quote, strong focus on atmosphere, narrative, player agency, and immersion in innovative territory with next-generation technologies, end quote. The information comes via a new job offer published on PlayStation's official careers website. The vacancy is for lead cinematic producers and reveals some interesting details about the studio's next game. It looks like it will be an ambitious, narrative-focused production. So it's been quite some time since we've talked about Firesprite. This is one of the bigger studios that Sony acquired quite some time ago. I believe they were acquired in either 2021 or 2022, and so far the only thing they produced this generation is Horizon Call of the Mountain. But what should be understood is that this is a massive team that Sony has. There's like hundreds of developers at Firesprite, and I've been saying for some time now that I believe they are working on Until Dawn 2. It did leak out that this project was codenamed Heartbreak, and it was some kind of survival horror title. We know that Sony clearly has interest in doing more with Until Dawn, and if you read not just this job description, but previous job descriptions, everything seemed to point in the direction of making either straight up an Until Dawn 2 or a game that sounds very similar to Until Dawn. But I could be wrong about that. Either way, we know they are working on a new AAA single-player, narrative-driven IP that will be horror-based. And so this is just kind of a reaffirmation that they're still working on it. The last thing I'll say here before we move on is they talk about, innovating in territory with next-generation technologies. That is going to kind of lead us into talking about the PlayStation 6 momentarily. But you do have to wonder if this project is going to end up being a PS6 title. If that's the case, it's still a few years away. I could see that being the reality. I mean, we know AAA games with massive budgets, they take longer than ever to develop. So I could maybe see it being like a cross-gen game, but who knows? Maybe this is a title they're trying to, get ready for the launch window of the PlayStation 6. But speaking of the PlayStation 6, we have quite a bit of new information to go over in regards to Sony's next generation console. I think what's important to highlight before we dive into any of this new information is anytime I mention the PlayStation 6, I see people kind of begin to immediately complain that we're talking about the PlayStation 6, and you have to keep in mind that the PlayStation 6 is years away. In fact, one of the things we're going to be covering is the fact that Mark Cerny is reiterating that this next generation console is multiple years away. It's not something that's coming out anytime soon, but that doesn't mean we're not going to get, information on it and, hear about what's going on behind the scenes or some of their plans. And obviously I'm going to cover that here. I just felt that that was worth saying before we get into it. But we're starting here with a article from Push Square that says PS6 to push the boundaries of graphics, and it will double down on machine learning. So It says here that PlayStation and tech giant AMD have announced a new partnership of sorts centered around the previously announced Project Amethyst, which is looking to push machine learning to new heights in regards to gaming. PlayStation console architect Mark Cerny recently met with AMD lead Jack Hunin, and the result is, well, a rather intricate social media post that explains the overall scope of Project Amethyst. Project Amethyst is a co-engineering effort between PlayStation and AMD focused on machine learning-driven graphics and gameplay innovations built around two core goals. This was what was written in an actual Twitter post. The first goal is designing an architecture optimized specifically for machine learning workloads in gaming, while the second revolves around developing high-quality neural networks that push the boundaries of real-time game graphics. Basically, the two companies believe that machine learning is the key to cranking visuals and performance to the next level in games. In theory, AI-driven solutions that work in real time to provide better resolutions and more fluid frame rates take the strain off of traditional hardware, which could obviously be huge for consoles. Of course, we've already seen Sony lean into this with the PS5 Pro, which is capable of incorporating PSSR in select titles. The AI-based upscaler allows for better image quality without sacrificing performance, and it's always been widely believed that Sony will continue to evolve this kind of tech going forward. This isn't just theory, it's a co-engineered reality. From hardware breakthroughs to software advances, we've delivered smarter, more efficient solutions like super resolution in FSR4. We're now paving the way for machine learning-based frame generation and ray regeneration in FSR Redstone. There's enormous potential ahead, and we're incredibly proud of what we achieved so far. So in other words, you can absolutely expect the PS6, which by this point is deep in development, to incorporate machine learning in a bid to squeeze maximum efficiency out of the console. It's an exciting time to be a graphics nerd, that's for sure. And it's also worth noting that this likely does feed into the rumor mill that is the upcoming PlayStation handheld. That's obviously a piece of technology that will utilize this, right? That's a piece of hardware, I should say, that will utilize this technology. But with that being said, there's another write-up here from Push Square where the title says the PlayStation 6 is still years away despite increase in next-generation chatter. It says Sony will have started work internally on the PS6 within weeks of the PS5's release back in 2020, but only in the last few months has it, along with Microsoft and the next Xbox, begun talking about its plans more publicly. So far, we know that Sony is collaborating with AMD for the PS6 internals, and a handheld device is heavily rumored to accompany the next-gen console. Meanwhile, the next Xbox console will expand Microsoft's vision by not locking it down to a single storefront, further leaning into the firm's "this is an Xbox" messaging. Given the recent talk surrounding the next gen, you might be thinking the PS6 is somewhere close to release. However, that's not the case. In a new interview from Tom's Guide with Mark Cerny, the lead PlayStation console architect explained that while AMD is moving extremely quickly on its graphics technology and upgrades in general, his plans are still a few years away from taking shape. What I'm trying to do is prepare for the next generation of consoles, so my time frame is multi-year here, he said. Console generations tend to last roughly 7 to 8 years before a new box releases and the old one receives less support. Sony has demonstrated this time frame in the past two generations, with the PS3 launching in 2006 and then being replaced by the PS4 in 2013, then the PS5 came along in 2020. Should the same thing happen this generation, the PS6 will likely release in 2027. However, this has been far from a normal generation for any hardware manufacturer, so that could end up changing the overall time frame. But yeah, again, as I said earlier, people always tend to ask, why are we talking about the PS6? Feels like this generation just got started. Listen, if you're somebody who just bought a PS5 Pro, if you're somebody who's feeling like, the gen is just getting started, we have multiple years before the PS6 is going to be on the market. And, a lot can happen in that time frame. But we have a significant update here regarding the PS5 Pro, and we're getting new information on what we can expect with this big update that's expected to come in 2026. Being reported by WCCF Tech, it said it has been confirmed that AMD FSR4 in its complete implementation will be available to PS5 Pro developers starting next year. This isn't surprising, considering that Sony helped AMD develop the algorithm as part of Project Amethyst. AMD's FSR4 will be available as an upgrade to the existing PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR, which debuted with the PS5 Pro launch in late 2024. In an interview with Tom's Guide, Sony lead system architect Mark Cerny explained, "The algorithm they came up with could be implemented on current generation hardware. So the co-developed algorithm has already been released by AMD as part of FSR4 on PC, and we're in the process of implementing it on PS5, and it will release next year on PS5 Pro. It's not a cut-down version of the algorithm. It's the full fat version of the co-developed super resolution that we'll be releasing on the PS5 Pro." Commenting on the ongoing Project Amethyst partnership with AMD, Mark Cerny added, "This is not for proprietary technology. This is really trying to move the industry forward. Obviously, we want to use these technologies on our consoles, but these technologies are available to any of AMD's customers freely. Big chunks of RDNA 5, or whatever AMD ends up calling it, are coming out of the engineering I am doing on the project. And again, this is coming out of trying to move things forward. There are no restrictions on the way any of it can be used. AMD is moving extremely quickly. What I'm trying to do is prepare for the next generation of consoles, so my time frame is multi-year here," which, the end of that quote is what we already covered. But I think two of the biggest things to highlight with these quotes from Mark Cerny is he is letting us know that when FSR4 drops on the PS5 Pro next year, it is full-blown FSR4. It's not like some kind of cut down or, altered version of it. It's just going to be full-blown FSR4. I just don't know if they're going to call it that or if they're going to call it PSSR2. We'll have to see about that. But either way, this is going to be hugely beneficial for games running on the PS5 Pro. And then the second thing he mentions here is that big chunks of RDNA 5, or whatever AMD is going to call it, which is the next generation architecture. Mark Cerny's made it clear that a lot of the work he's doing, is being implemented into that. And RDNA 5 is not going to be exclusive to the PS6, which is interesting to think about. But it's going to be huge because whatever Mark Cerny is doing here with AMD, the PlayStation 6 is going to benefit greatly from. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. If you did, be sure to leave it a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share the video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.